Welcome back to Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. I think I forgot to say at the beginning that I'm David Tamayo. I'm president of Hispanic American Freethinkers, nonprofit organization. And full disclosure, Luciano is one of our recent members of the board of directors. We needed some smart young people to join our group, the board, and he's doing a great job. So I'm glad that he's visiting here the area and that he's able to be with us here in the studio. So thank you for being here. Today we're going to talk about how many ways to what?
We're going to talk about 1,001 ways to die.
All right, full disclosure, we're probably not going to cover 1,001, but we could if we had the time and hours and hours for this show. So we're going to try to cover as much as possible, and if that works, great. If not, then we'll continue on until we run out of things to talk about. But I doubt it. Just too much. So why don't we start with what is science and pseudoscience? Because what we're going to talk a lot about today is stuff that is sort of in between. Sometimes people can't differentiate. It sounds like science. There's an ology attached to it. And so therefore, like biology, so there's ology in there, it's a science word, and a lot of people get fooled that way. So maybe I was thinking that perhaps we can talk about, well, first of all, why should people not use pseudoscience?
Pseudoscience is very dangerous because it's unproven. And if it's unproven, lots of people think that means that it's on the way to being proven rather than being actively disproven, as is often the case. And in addition to this, when people die or when people are permanently injured due to pseudoscience, part of the danger is that they think that there are organizations, that they think that there are people that they can blame rather than their own lack of critical thinking skills.
Yeah, it's funny because, you're right. Every time we hear somebody getting hurt, what usually happens is we got people saying, oh, it's just that person did it wrong. That person didn't do what they were supposed to do correctly. So the pseudoscience was imperfectly done. But by definition, so we talked about this before the show. So maybe we can talk about the differences of pseudoscience and science. So I'll tell you what, why don't you take the science side and I'll take the pseudoscience side so we can see the differences. The differences between pseudoscience and science are as follows. So in pseudoscience, you have fixed ideas. This is the energy, this is how it works, this is, so fixed ideas. What about in science?
In science, there's always a willingness to change with new evidence. What this means in practice is that if new evidence comes along which disrupts old established ideas, those old established ideas will be willing to change in order to reflect the new evidence, the new ideas that are being theorized, and the new routes that are being considered.
Okay, and so in pseudoscience, there's no peer review. By peer, we mean people that are experts that can test things and show that it works. In science, do they have peer review?
They have ruthless peer review. And ruthless peer review means that no matter how famous you are, no matter how well-loved you are, if your ideas are bad or if they reflect a lack of evidence or other major issues, they will be challenged and they will be discarded.
And now, because of that, it doesn't mean that you're considered stupid or anything like that. In fact, that is the purpose. People want to have the right ideas and be famous for coming up with good stuff, something that will save lives or something, And having your peers be ruthless about it there's no better way. And it also makes people think twice before they put ideas backing them up with a lot of evidence. So another difference in pseudoscience, they tend to select and cherry pick the stuff. The wins, the stuff that, you see, it worked, What about in science?
In science, they take account of all of the information that's being presented. They try to present all of the information. They try to talk about all the variables, all the factors, and that's very important because science wants you to know how things work.
Yeah. So just to give you an example of what cherry picking is like taking a broken watch and saying, well, this watch is good because twice a day at 3:30 when it's broken, it gives me the time, twice a day. So you cherry pick those 2 times and not realize that all the other times it's showing you the wrong time. So it's very similar to the cherry picking part. All right, pseudoscience sees criticism as a conspiracy. Every time somebody criticizes, oh, it's big pharma, is the doctors that they don't want to lose their jobs, is the scientists that, you know.
The meteorologists.
Yeah. And so in science, are there conspiracies, or what are they? What about criticism?
Science, in theory, invites criticism. It welcomes criticism because it seeks the correct information, and it seeks to be able to verify and demonstrate that this information is reflective of reality, that it's the true information.
In fact, I would say that any idea in science that hasn't been criticized is not a theory. It's just a hypothesis. Once that hypothesis is criticized and vetted and criticized a lot for years, sometimes decades, it becomes accepted science after it survived all those criticisms. So yeah, it's very important. What about results in experimentation? In pseudoscience, there are no repeatable results. So you do 5 tests, and all 5 will be different. No guarantee that they'll be the same, and they can still claim that the pseudoscience works.
In science, you need verifiable, repeatable results. And repeatable is a very important word, especially when it relates to medicine and doctors and health. You do not want one result that works and 10 results that don't work in science. That's pseudoscience, that's faith healing, and a lot of other really bad things.
Mm-hmm. And what about, in pseudoscience, it claims that it's used for many things. You know, you remember from the 1800s the snake oil sales. You know, this will make your hair grow, it'll make you great in bed, it'll cure your psoriasis, it'll do, you know, everything. In science,
there are limited claims of usefulness, and this is a good thing because they want to honestly market it. They want people to accept it based off of the fact that it has a certain number of usages, a limited number of usages, rather than being a cure-all.
Yes, and one last thing is measurement. When they measure things in pseudoscience, they kind of ballpark it. They say, you know, add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that, and, you know, there's no really formula that says this will work. This is the. I mean, you do formulas for cooking, for instance, and end up with, if you want the same result every time. So, I mean, I'll give the example of McDonald's. They don't have the best hamburgers in the world, of course, but they make the same exact hamburger every time because everything is very measured. And so whether you like them or don't like them, the process is that way. And in science and technology, I mean, every cell phone that you buy from the same manufacturer, the same model, is exactly identical because of that. And in science,
In science, they're accurate measurements, and this is extremely important when it comes to medicine and when it comes to lots of things that people consume, because you can overdose on things, and overdosing is obviously extraordinarily dangerous, but if you only have ballpark measurements, obviously overdosing probably wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yes. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about in all of this today is alternative medicine. Now, alternative medicine is referred to as all that medicine, now I'm going to use my air quotes, all that medicine that hasn't been shown yet to work, as you said before, and that is not currently accepted by the medical and scientific communities. Why won't they accept it? Because it hasn't been proven yet. Now, the problem with the yet in there, as you said before, is that some people think, well, they're in the process of it. But as we're going to see today, there's a lot of stuff that has been around for a long time, you know, and then you hear, well, this is an ancient art of healing. This is an ancient, and so buzzword number one for today, when you see the word ancient, immediately, you know, raise up your eyebrows and go, oh, we got to watch out for this. You know, ancient art, ancient this. Well, you know, there's a lot of ancient things we no longer do, like live in cages and caves. So, you know, we have to be careful about that. So,
if you need the authority's opinion on that, I'm studying to become a historian, so you can trust me. We no longer do a lot of really bad, really dangerous things.
And it's a good thing. The problem is, again, so buzzword for alternative medicine is ancient. Another buzzword is integrative medicine or complementary. I hear that one a lot, complementary medicine. In other words, yeah, take these pills that don't do anything along with the chemotherapy, and you'll see that these pills will help you. You know, and that way, you know, your body count is lower. You know, you don't have to. With alternative medicine, what are some of the other issues or problems that we have with alternative medicine?
Alternative medicine is very dangerous, partially because alternative medicine doesn't discriminate in the sense that if it doesn't work for someone who is poor, it will not work for someone who is rich.
That's
and
a good point.
That's something that we really need to talk about, because what happened to Steve Jobs is something that can happen to anyone. And the fact that it happened to someone as wealthy and someone as famous and someone generally
Smart.
as respected as him is proof that if it doesn't work for him, it probably won't work for your neighbor.
Yes, and I have to admit that sometimes people that are extremely educated and have no reason to not have to do some of these things, they are going to they do it. They're people that will say, look, it worked for my cousin, and so they take anecdotes as being evidence. And an anecdote from your cousin's cousin is not. Anyway, it looks like we have a call. Perhaps we can take a call right now and see if.
Hi, this is Dante from Fairfax.
Yes.
Or something like that.
I think. Sorry, I think we you got cut off. You got cut off.
My answer off the air. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Your audio is having. We can't hear you.
You got choppy and got cut off.
So I'm wondering, how do you tell the difference between the stuff, like when I'm at Whole Foods or CVS or something, how do I tell the difference between the good stuff and the other? Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question. In fact, as I was coming over here today, you would assume that if you go to Walgreens or CVS or any your regular pharmacy down the street, that they're only going to sell you medicine. But in fact, what you will see is that they have a whole section on homeopathy, a whole section on stuff that doesn't work at all, that is pseudoscience, on super vitamins and for travel so you can protect yourself, and things that have never shown to be worked. And when I've talked to pharmacists and I've talked to the people there, they say, hey, above all, we're a business. People ask for this thing, so we're going to sell it. We don't think we're doing any harm to people. And hey, if we don't sell it, somebody else is going to sell it. The problem with that, of course, is that you go into a pharmacy and you assume that it's medicine what they sell there. But obviously, if it's the same place that sells you beer and sells you balloons and other things, you need to be a critical thinker in that sense. There were. Last year, the homeopathy alone, which we're going to talk about in a minute, homeopathy alone last year, they sold $39 billion of pseudoscience, of medicine that is useless, that in fact will cause harm, not because swallowing the sugar pills is going to do anything to you, but because people take that thinking that they're taking care of the problem. In the meantime, the problem is getting worse, as it happened with Steve Jobs.
Part of the danger of this is that there is anti-science rhetoric in this country, which relates back to one of our announcements earlier today when we talked about the March for Science. By allowing anti-science rhetoric and by celebrating unproven claims, we allow people to think that things like homeopathic medicine is valid when it really isn't. And it's been demonstrated to be unuseful over and over and over again, but we don't hear that.
Yeah, and there's lobbying groups, obviously. The pharmaceutical companies will sometimes lobby, or not the pharmaceutical, but the pharmacies, the companies that are making the money selling it, they will lobby Congress, and they will lobby, so to avoid passing any laws. Right now, a lot of those medicines are considered food supplements. And so the FDA doesn't touch them so long as they don't make a direct claim that this cures your headaches. Now, they put the words headache, they put other words in there. Now, right before coming to the show, I wanted to buy some. I just forgot my wallet at home because I wanted us to chomp on some of these things because it won't do anything, but that's the problem. Sometimes you need stuff to be done. And if you don't do anything, then your disease is just progressing and you have this false sense of security there.
Another thing that we need to talk about is the fact that there is a thing called the placebo effect. And that is good to a certain extent for making you think that you're getting better. But it's very dangerous because you only think that you're getting better. You're not actually treating yourself.
And sometimes so, you know, in the power of prayer, one of the things that I often say is, you know, if you get like a really bad cold, you pray really, really hard, and perhaps even take a little bit of NyQuil for the symptoms, but after 3 days or so, you're going to be cured, and you'll see that that prayer will cure you. Well, it turns out that it doesn't matter what you do. Typically, it takes about 3 days for a cold to run its course. And so a lot of the placebo effect is that your body responding on its own for a lot of things. But if you got a cancer, or you got leukemia, or you got diabetes, or some of those things, you can't be fooling around with this. And the problem with a lot of this alternative medicine is that you have a lot of famous people peddling it, pushing it. Sometimes it's hard to believe this is because they believe it, or because they're in bed with the people making the money for it, or they're getting paid for it. But Oprah Winfrey is one that has peddled, you know, alternative medicine. Dr. Oz, a medical doctor with a real degree that really knows this stuff, he's done it before. And for some of the older people from the 70s like me, Farrah Fawcett died also trying to get cured with alternative medicine. And so there are a lot of people in the Hollywood, and you know, the people admire, who do all this woo, as James Randi used to call it, you know, this woo, this magic kind of stuff, and it sells more and it propagates. It's very difficult to fight it.
One of the things that we also need to talk about is that there's this idea that if it's an adult who dies or who's permanently injured because of this, that's only their own foolishness, which is true in theory and in isolation, but the reality is that these people often have children. Yeah. And their children often don't have the choice. They often don't have the say in their homes to get conventional medicine or to be treated by real doctors who are advancing science and trying to make them actually get better.
It's in fact the same problem that some religions have, like Christian Science, where they don't believe in going to the doctor at all. And every couple of years, he never fails to see in the news a child that is dying from something preventable, from an abscessed tooth, or from diabetes, or for something that today we could fix in a few minutes with just a little bit of medicine. And that itself, it's the problem that the children have these parents that in a way are ignorant about the reality of these things, and they're suffering for it. And it's the job of the government to a certain degree to try to protect these children. Anything else on alternative medicine? I just thought of one more thing. Part of the problem is that a lot of insurance companies are starting to pay for this. They're starting to pay to have acupuncture and chiropractors and for pseudoscience. So what it does, it validates this pseudoscience, it validates this alternative medicines, and people start thinking and believing that this is the right thing to do. And a lot of hospitals, in order not to have the patient go to another hospital, or they will have their own complementary stuff, which is useless and they know it, but it's a way to generate more revenue for the hospital. And if they figured, hey, so long as we're controlling it over here, no harm done because we're doing it. But what they don't understand is that they're propagating and pushing this alternative medicine stuff that is not good. The argument also that a lot of politicians say is, well, what we're trying to do is give people a choice. You're trying to be a dictator. You don't want to give people should have the choice, but those children don't have a choice, right? So that's another argument that we have to watch out for when it comes to that. All of us, you, the viewer, us, everyone, it's our job, it's our duty as citizens of the country to try to educate people against pseudoscience, because it hurts people, it makes our country worse off, higher expenses in every respect, unnecessary. I mean, those $34 billion that are being spent on pseudoscience could have been spent in medicine, in real medicine, in research, for instance. It's terrible. So what else do we have as far as, I think we should talk about, go ahead.
So one of the things that we also haven't really talked about is that we're not really going to talk about it so much in this particular episode, but in some of the topics on whatstheharm.net, which is a website that has a list of things that have killed people, very silly things like exorcisms, we need to realize that it isn't always just children and their parents. Sometimes communities can force these things on people, and this happens more often with things like exorcisms than it does with conventional alternative medicine. But
well, I see the anti-vax movement in that light. Where the family and everybody starts getting into the bandwagon with misinformation. And that misinformation, I mean, so are these people bad because they're doing this, or what?
They're not necessarily, they're not evil, they're not malintentioned, but additionally, there are things like ableism. If you are a vaccine denier on the basis that it causes autism, what you're really saying is that you think it's better that a child possibly dies than be born with autism.
Yeah, by the way, for the record, there's no connection there at all. No connection at all. So, all right, well, let's talk about some of the
topics.
So, naturopathy. That one, what it is. What is it?
Naturopathy is a medicinal idea that's peddled by some charlatans that medicine relies entirely on natural remedies. What this means is they have placebos, they have sugar pills, and maybe plants. They might make some sort of tea or some extract. Yeah. They'll give it to you, and you won't get any better, but if you do, they'll say that it was a success.
They'll take the credit for it. Well, the interesting part, so let's break this down. Naturopath it's talk about nature. It assumes that if something is natural, then it must be good for you. Except that, like, plutonium is natural, and don't eat plutonium. You know, Mercury is bad for you. Asbestos is natural also, and let's not talk about poop, which is also very natural, and yet I don't think, well, some might, I don't know. But the idea is, you know, just because it's natural, so it's a fallacy. It's called a natural fallacy. And I was shocked and surprised that when I went to look up this topic a little bit more, there is an organization in the United States that is putting out physicians. They call themselves doctors and they call themselves physicians, but they won't use medicine. They use what you talked about, you know, these teas and these things. And it's really serious. The American Medical Association has been having a big fight with them. And when I say fight, is both groups are probably giving a lot of money to Congress people to, you know, manipulate this stuff because, you know, government's for sale, so if you get the money. And so what it's doing is, now you know, the problem is that as this grows, and some states recognize them already, California, the District of Columbia, recognize them as being doctors and physicians, no different than anyone else, then the problem is you will tend to go to some of these and not know that that they're not real doctors, that they're not evidence-based, that they're peddling pseudoscience. And so it's extremely, extremely dangerous for the naturopath. And of course, you know, I looked up, what do you think it takes to be a doctor, a physician and naturopath?
Probably a vested interest in naturopathy.
Yeah, they said bachelor's degree, and of course go for 5 years to their schools, and which has to be approved by them, of course. Otherwise, it's not a true naturopath. And so, well, naturopath. Stay away from that. One
of the things that I want to mention about this is that we are both Latin American, and both of us have lived in Latin America. This is an idea, this is one of the few ideas, actually, that I've seen on today's list that is rampant in Latin America. And we have brujeria shops, we have shops where you can buy plants, you can buy elixirs.
Yes, the botanicas.
Modern day snake oil.
Yes, that make a lot of money, and they usually target the people that can least afford it. I know of this shop here in Alexandria, Virginia, where the wife is in the back and she reads the cards and the palm and does her magic stuff, and then she writes a prescription. When they come out, the husband is outside selling the prescription, all the stuff that she prescribed. Oddly enough, all the stuff that she prescribed is the stuff available in the store. And so they take in the people from both sides, and I've seen people walk out in there, coming out with with that. So as we go through the other ones, we have some pictures for later that we'll see. But for now, why don't we talk a little bit about acupuncture? What is acupuncture?
Acupuncture is a traditional Chinese medicine art/technique which involves using tiny needles, apparently it's painless, to redirect the flow of qi, which is life energy.
Okay, so remember that word qi. When you hear the word energy, where you hear, it's not what physics means by energy, of force to create work. No, this is an invisible thing that cannot be measured, cannot be tested, cannot be done anything with it. So why is this dangerous, or why shouldn't people do acupuncture?
The main reason why I would argue that people shouldn't use acupuncture is that it largely doesn't work. There are people who believe that it does. There are people who propagate studies, theoretical studies, that it helps cancer victims in some cases. It uses
flood studies, yeah.
It reduces pain, apparently.
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, remember the word I said, watch out for ancient, and you'll see a lot of it Chinese, Indian, things from a foreign culture. That are used because more difficult to investigate, is written in a foreign language, and most people are just too lazy to go check it out. Now, one thing that is important to say with acupuncture is that there are risks to it. They include nerve damage, they include infection, bruises, hepatitis from dirty needles, even AIDS. They can anything, all kinds of infections that you can get from it. So it's very important to not do this because it's useless, really. And if you decide to do it, do your homework. Just go to the internet, don't go to the internet like most people do to find things that prove what you want to see. Go look at the skeptic sites, and anything that is true doesn't mind being questioned. Skeptics. It wants skeptics to take a look at it. That's what medicine is about. It's skepticism, and if it passes the skeptic eye, then it's good stuff. So, anything else before we go to the next one?
I think it's time that we talk about alternative or holistic dentists. And
my goodness.
This is a really fun one to talk about because if you have bad teeth, you can have a heart attack.
Yes.
It's actually been shown that your arteries can get
especially
blocked.
if you have a heart murmur also, the bacteria will go to the heart valve and sort of hang in there and cause the heart attack also. But it's interesting because there are different aspects of it, some more than others. I'm sure some of you have heard the fact that if you have the amalgam, the metal fillings, that they don't use them anymore, but from years ago they used to have, that stuff is poisoning you, that stuff is bad for you. And it's funny is I had an uncle that died at the age of 98, and he had fillings everywhere. And so I guess he could have lived to 120 had it not been for those poisonous things.
Dang it, metal.
Well, a lot of times they say, well, that's made with the mercury, and and that sips in, and it's BS. They changed. A lot of dentists like to change them now because being metal, it expands and contracts, and so sometimes it'll break a tooth because of that, but not because it's poisoning you. So that's kind of a BS one. Not that all the others aren't, right? All right, so what's next?
Next on our list is autism denial. I mentioned this earlier, but this is really dangerous, not just because it's linked to the anti-vaccination movement, because it's not just linked to the anti-vaccination movement. It's also dangerous because if you deny a child the ability to see a specialist, then you can permanently damage their ability to relate to their surroundings.
It could be a lot worse, yeah. All right, so, let's just go right in because we're running short on time already. Wow. Why don't we go directly to anti-vax? And I think we have a picture on that for the anti-vaccination. We have, what's anti-vaccination?
Anti-vaccination is an organized set of individuals who believe, generally speaking, that vaccines cause autism, or that the more vaccines you get, the more likely you are to have autism. And it's based on a flawed study that was conducted in the 90s, I believe, and has since been retracted.
And and it was not only that, it was retracted because all these other scientists came in and showed with evidence that that study was flawed, and that's how science is supposed to work. But the people that are anti-vax, as they're called, they think vaccines are bad, they tend to be highly educated people that they think that, hey, my Googling is better than the experts that actually know about this. And of course, they will throw in all kinds of things. The problem is that there is a body count for this. This does kill people. We have famous actors and actresses that peddle this and push it because they have a child like that, and well, they got to blame somebody. They can't say they don't know, and so when they can't know, they have to blame somebody, and they don't want to blame themselves, their genetics or anything else. They say, no, it was the vaccines. My child was fine when I gave the vaccines, and the vaccines contain mercury, and therefore, that's what it was. But it's not. Some of them used to contain mercury, and but it turns out that is the same thing as saying, look, sodium can kill you, chloride can kill you, but sodium chloride is necessary and a stable salt, and you need that for your food and for healthy living. So it's kind of the same thing. Now,
one of the odd things about the anti-vaccine movement is that it's one of the only things on this list where there are actually laws starting to take place, laws that are starting to be proposed, laws that are starting to pass in some cases, where if you are a proponent of this movement and you are subjecting your child to it, despite the fact that you have vaccines in almost every case, you are now being denied the right to take your child to school because your child poses a risk to other people, because not everyone can get vaccines. There are people who have autoimmune conditions. There are people who are, in some cases, allergic to what's inside of vaccines. And because of this, you and your children and your family actually do pose a real health risk to the safety of, in some cases, thousands of other children.
Yes, is that what is called the herd immunization? And so what happened is they're doing it as, well, it's my freedom, is the freedom of choice. It's, I don't want to put poison because, this was made by pharmaceuticals and they just want to poison the children, which is totally logical, of course. Why would you want to poison and kill potential customers,
yeah.
And so the idea here is that now the preventable diseases and things that we should have eliminated by now are starting to pop up. And we had a picture of USA Today that was showing just from last week, this is a couple of weeks ago, that the number of moms, I believe it was, is going up. There's school systems that are being overrun by things that we had gotten rid of all that stuff. But parents, again, taking care of the children and these children suffering because of the parents. And again, as I said before, with anti-vax, the majority of people are actually highly educated, very affluent people. It's not lack of education, it's lack of critical thinking. It's saying, oh, this thing that I want to believe is more important than the actual science, and I don't trust the science because of the anti-science movement that we've seen over the last 30 years in this country, where the scientist is the villain and not the savior, and that's very different in this culture than it's been in other cultures.
Next one that we're going to talk about.
Before we go down, one last comment on it. Trump, our new president, fortunately, he hasn't gone out to say that we shouldn't vaccinate kids, which is a good thing. But one criticism that he has said is that the reason autism is caused by vaccines is because all these vaccinations are given all at one time. First of all, that's false. They're given over a few years. And second, there's no evidence for that. And so, well, again, alternative facts. He's one of the only people ever that doesn't need to provide evidence for people to believe. So anyway, from that sense, at least the government is not actively trying to prohibit vaccination. That's probably the next step. We're already doing that with environment and other stuff, right? All right, so what's the next one?
And the next one is astrology. Would you like to provide a brief explanation?
Astrology is this crazy idea that depending on the year, the day that you were born, that the stars were aligned in a certain way, and that somehow either the light or the gravity or the energy, in quotes again, of those stars and how they're arranged, that determines your future. It determines, how lucky or unlucky you're in life, and it determines whether you're going to find a tall, dark, handsome person next week. It's absolute BS. And actually, I tell people to do an experiment. Get 3 different horoscopes for the same week, same month, whatever, and have somebody read all 3 to you, and you, number one, try to determine which one is yours. Have them determine, read 2 that are not and 1 that is. Or actually look all 3 yourself and realize that all 3 for you are different. And they will always use very generic term that applies to anyone. You go like this and point to one and read that horoscope, and it applies to you because it's all general platitudes that don't mean anything. But why is this bad for you?
This is bad for you not only because it can lead you to make bad personal decisions, but
I'm not going to that job interview today. My horoscope says not a good day.
Today is the worst day for me. I'll die if I go to that job interview.
Yeah.
Astrology has, on very rare occasions, been used to make important decisions that are not just personal. And if you have people who believe this, who are in charge of organizations, or if they're in charge of governmental agencies, very, very bad things can happen, because astrology doesn't just affect you on a personal level, it can affect the planet itself according to some of its most radical proponents.
We had one president, Ronald Reagan, who always gave to astrology. He went and got advice from astrologists. Incredible. Hey, look, we got, so the things we're not going to cover: Feng Shui, hypnosis, numerology, reflexology. Man, we have a picture for reflexology. Okay, let's take a look at the picture for reflexology. Real quick on that one, I recommend that it's this idea where people have zones in your feet and your hands, and that pressure in them might be pleasurable, but it's certainly not going to cure anything. So I leave it up to the, because we only have 5 minutes. Didn't I tell you we're going to run out of time? Look at this.
There's just so much to cover.
There's colon cleansing. No pictures on the colon cleansing. But I want to jump to homeopathy, because that's a big one. We talked about that one. And, what is homeopathy?
Homeopathy is,
we've got about 4 minutes.
It's basically this idea, it's related to naturopathy, and it's the treatment of disease by minute doses of natural substances that in a healthy person would produce symptoms of disease.
All right, so I have diarrhea, and how do they make the diarrhea medicine, quote unquote, for in homeopathy?
I would assume they just take part of what caused it.
So they take something that causes diarrhea, and they put a drop in it in a gallon of water. They shake it. They take a drop of that, put it in another gallon of water, and shake it. And they do that about 100 times, or 1,000, or even more. And then they will take that one drop, after you do it 100 times, and you put it into a pill, a sugar pill. And they said that the more diluted it is, the more powerful it is, because it's got the essence and the energy in there of what caused the diarrhea or whatever, and that if you take it, that now you are going to be sort of feeling better about it. The fact is, I actually, as I said, I stopped to get it. I wanted to eat a whole bottle over here, but no luck. The problem with this, of course, is that you're never going to see contraceptives that are homeopathic. The military doesn't use it to stop bleeding out in the field, so no anticoagulant that is that. And those 2 points were pointed out by our producer, Paul. And, and again, the way they get around it is by calling it a food supplement. And so if this is a food supplement, then it's considered food, and then the FDA has no say on it. So with homeopathy, you see it everywhere. That's a problem, and you don't realize that is homeopathy, that it doesn't work, that is useless. Have you ever tried it?
I have never tried it because my parents care about my health.
Well, and again, sometimes parents care. They're just ignorant. They just don't know. People will say, but it worked for my cousin, so why doesn't it work for me? So again, this is a problem that we have. There's a strong lobbying, and they said that it's a growing industry. So a lot of these companies that do these products are publicly traded. They're in the stock market, and they say they're growing. They expect to continue growing over the next year. And in England, for instance, the organization there that does the homeopathy has gone to the point that anytime anyone criticizes them, they will sue them and try to sue them into submission. So I wonder if it's ever going to get to be like that over here. I certainly hope not. So anyway, we have 3 minutes left or less. We have one more thing for which we have a picture, so I wanted to put the picture up. One is cupping. Are you familiar with cupping?
Cupping relates to, it's another Chinese practice.
See?
And it's
ancient Chinese.
Yep, we have to be specific with these buzzwords. It's used, they heat up candles underneath cups, and they use it to draw out negative qi. They use it to help enhance your personal qi. And of course, it actually happened in the Olympics this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see a lot of famous people doing it. And so every time that you see that, you know. Now, one last one that I want to do is to mention Scientology. They have an e-meter. The e-meter in Scientology is, we have a picture for that, is, again, pseudoscience. No evidence that shows that this works, and it's a way to get people to convince them that they have things and issues that they need to work out that, oddly enough, the religion of Scientology will fix for you. And so again, people see this, it must be science, it's Scientology, they have an e-meter, a meter, well, you know, so let's, have, let's use that. So I think we're coming down to the last few seconds of the show, and the clock says 58 minutes.
Yes, the show runs 58 minutes.
We need something that runs down to 0. See, nothing in there is 0. Nothing in there is 0.
This
It's not 0.
This is now counting up
Oh, it's counting up.
because this is the time you were supposed to.
So we're going to put the old one back up for you, Dave. I'm sorry.
Put something big that says this is the countdown.
This is. the
And put
countdown.
0 when 0
So-
Now
is.
counting up because we're past.
Great show, Steve.
Could I
Steve.
be heard?
Huh?
Okay, good. Because the video